Welcome to this explainer. When we dive into the source material on the history of justice, there's this one visceral thought experiment that just really hits you. I want you to imagine you're living 50,000 years ago. There are no courts, no judges, no police departments, and definitely no lawyers billing you by the hour. Now imagine someone in your immediate group just stole your food, or they attacked someone weaker, totally unprovoked. What exactly do you do?
This isn't just some fun rhetorical puzzle meant to make us grateful for modern life. This was an incredibly high-stakes practical problem that our ancient ancestors faced all the time. When someone completely ruins the cooperative atmosphere of your tiny 50-person band, when they become violent or just relentlessly selfish, how do you restore order without any modern legal infrastructure? Well, as it turns out, early humans solved this with a system that was actually more socially intelligent, flexible, and egalitarian than almost anything that came after it.
To understand how they survived, we really have to recognize one absolutely crucial fact: interdependence equaled survival. In this highly mobile, pre-agricultural world, hunter-gatherers lived in small bands of, say, 20 to 50 people. And in a group that size, you just couldn't hide your behavior. Your reputation wasn't just social currency, it was your literal existence. Losing the support of your community meant losing access to shared food, protection, and care if you got sick. Out there in a landscape full of predators, losing your standing in the group was effectively a solo death sentence.
Okay, let's dive into this, because this is where it gets fascinating. Anthropologist Christopher Boehm spent decades studying 48 distinct hunter-gatherer societies all over the globe, and he uncovered something completely mind-bending. He called it the reverse dominance hierarchy. These societies were intensely, deliberately egalitarian. But here's the thing, they didn't maintain that equality by accident. They maintained it by actively ensuring the collective group always dominated the individual.
Think about your standard primate hierarchies for a second, like chimpanzees or gorillas. Power flows top-down, right? The alphas take the best resources, and their rank is maintained through brute strength and intimidation. The bottom submits simply because the top can hurt them. But ancient humans? They completely flipped the script. It was bottom-up equality. If anyone tried to act like an alpha, hoarding food, throwing their weight around, seeking way too much status, the collective actively pulled them down. Power flowed upward from the group, not downward from a single ruler.
So how exactly did they pull aspiring alphas down without, written rules or a police force? They used a deeply structured, escalating system of social enforcement: gossip, ridicule, ostracism, and ultimately, execution. It started out soft and then became progressively harder until the problem was resolved. Let's walk through exactly how this operated.
Stage 1 was gossip. Now, in this context, gossip isn't just idle chatter or social entertainment. It was literally the Paleolithic newsletter. It was an essential early warning system. When someone started misbehaving, the community didn't just confront them right away. Instead, they started talking among themselves, building a shared understanding, and coordinating a collective interpretation of what was happening. It was essentially a collective social trial happening in casual conversation way before any formal action was ever taken. And honestly, usually just feeling that social temperature drop was enough to make an offender correct their behavior. But what if gossip wasn't enough? Well, that brings us to stage 2, public ridicule. In a small band society, this was a huge deal. It wasn't just minor teasing. The group would openly confront, name, and mock the bad behavior right in front of everyone. By doing this, they were sending a crystal clear message. The informal protection and goodwill that the group normally extends to you, that has been formally suspended. Your social status is being publicly revised downward. A perfect example of this is what anthropologists call leveling mechanisms. Picture this: a highly successful hunter returns to camp and starts loudly boasting about his remarkable kill, basically demanding special recognition. Instead of praising him, the community would actually mock him. They'd happily eat the food for sure, but they collectively roasted his ego. Why? Because demanding credit was seen as a demand for power, and allowing one single person to accumulate power was an existential threat to the egalitarian structure that kept everyone safe. Now, if the ridicule didn't work, things escalated to a profoundly serious level. Stage 3 is ostracism, which, as we mentioned earlier, was effectively a delayed death sentence. Today, if you get shunned from a group, you can just move to a new city or find new friends. But 50,000 years ago, the highly mobile camp might just pack up and literally move away without you. Being excluded meant you could no longer hunt effectively, defend yourself, or survive an illness. It completely exposed you to lethal, practical vulnerabilities. And then we reach the final stage, stage 4, execution.
This is actually one of the most startlingly documented findings in anthropological history. For repeat, extreme offenders, we're talking serial killers, chronic resource thieves, or persistent violent bullies who ignored every single previous warning, the group collectively reached a deadly consensus.
But the absolute crucial point here is how this was carried out. It wasn't random violence, and it certainly wasn't a personal vendetta. It was a distributed act of communal safety. The execution was carried out by a small group on behalf of everyone simultaneously. By acting as a unified collective, they removed the act from the domain of personal revenge and placed it strictly in the domain of social necessity. No single person bore the full weight of the decision because the decision belonged to the entire society.
When we step back and look at this system as a whole, its genius is undeniable. It wasn't some crude caveman prototype, it was incredibly sophisticated. It was proportional. Minor offenses got gossip, severe offenses got severe consequences. It was methodical, providing space for behavioral correction at every single stage. And most importantly, it was fundamentally egalitarian. Nobody, literally no matter how strong or charismatic they were, was exempt from the community's behavioral norms.
All right, let's move forward and see how this all builds when civilization actually arrives. Fast forward thousands of years as humans settled into agricultural societies and started building cities. Justice evolved. It went from hunter-gatherer bands to written codes like Ur-Nammu and Hammurabi. And sure, the system became scalable and predictable. But as we're about to see, it was fundamentally altered.
The oldest physical law code we've ever recovered is the Code of Ur-Nammu from ancient Sumer, right around 2100 BCE. It was written on clay tablets with a very clear if-then structure. But what's really surprising here is how it handled physical harm. Instead of physical retaliation, it focused heavily on financial compensation. If you knocked out someone's tooth, you didn't lose your own tooth. You paid 2 shekels of silver. The whole goal was to restore economic balance to the victim.
But things shifted dramatically just a few centuries later. Enter the famous Hammurabi's Code around 1750 BCE. Hammurabi moved decisively away from financial compensation and permanently formalized the concept of lex talionis, the law of retaliation. You know the phrase, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Under his code, the punishment was strictly designed to physically and directly mirror the crime itself.
But here's where we find the most troubling provision of written law. Under Hammurabi, if a free man knocked out the eye of another free man, the offender lost his eye. Simple enough, right? But if that exact same free man knocked out the eye of a slave, he only paid a fine. The physical crime was absolutely identical. The only thing that changed the legal response was the social class of the victim. And here, my friends, is the ultimate plot twist of human history. Civilization, with all its polished stone pillars and written rules, actually institutionalized the very thing that hunter-gatherers had spent millennia obsessively fighting to prevent. The explicit built-in class stratification of punishment meant that the powerful now received special protection under the law. Civilization literally wrote inequality into law, and they called it justice.
Now make no mistake, the shift to formal institutions brought undeniable benefits. Written law gave us predictability. It gave us the ability to govern massive populations where not everyone knows each other. But the courts, the codes, the pillars, the lawyers, they are just infrastructure. In gaining that infrastructure, we lost something huge, the genuine distributed consensus of a community that collectively cared about the outcome and held every single member to the exact same standard.
Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought to end our explainer today. When we look back at the pure egalitarianism of our ancient ancestors and we compare it to the codified inequalities that built the modern world, did we trade true justice for legal infrastructure? It completely rethinks what progress really means, doesn't it? Thank you so much for exploring this with me today. I really hope this leaves you looking at our modern justice